My stepmom framed me for a crime to steal my inheritance, and my dad disowned me for years until the shocking truth came out. At the age of 9, my world was already torn apart by my parents' divorce. I spent weekdays with my mother, near school, and weekends with my dad, who lived a bit farther away. Despite their separation, both my parents always treated me with love and kindness. Still, there was an undeniable ache in my chest, a void that deepened as I watched other kids with their whole families. But as time passed, I understood that they both loved me deeply, even though they weren't together. My father, in particular, never missed a chance to show that his love for me was unwavering. Life seemed like it could be okay, despite the fractured family dynamics. Then, everything shifted when my dad met Gina. At first, she seemed sweet, and I remember my dad smiling in a way I hadn't seen before. At 11, I was eager to accept her into our family, hoping that she could be the motherly figure I had always missed. She had twin daughters, Emma and Emily, and while they were a bit older, I thought we'd all get along just fine. My father seemed so hopeful, so confident that everything would be perfect. The idea of a new family member excited me. Yet, when Gina married my father at 12, everything started to change. The first signs of tension came when she told me, harshly, that she didn't like me and that we had to pretend for my dad's sake. It crushed me, leaving a cold, lingering feeling that never went away. What hurt the most was that she was no longer a stranger. She was supposed to be my family. That feeling of rejection, so deep and raw, began to haunt me every day, every weekend I spent at my dad's. As the months passed after their marriage, I slowly realized that Gina's true feelings toward me were far from kind. It started with small things, comments about my appearance, my height, and my awkwardness. She would say I was too tall for a girl, or that my clothes were out of style, little jabs that would pierce my heart more than I cared to admit. At first, I tried to shrug it off, telling myself she was just adjusting to having a new family member. But it didn't take long for the bitterness to grow in her words. Then one morning, she said something that shattered me. She looked me straight in the eye and coldly told me she didn't like me. The words hit me like a slap in the face. "We need to pretend to get along for your dad's sake," she said, and the cruel indifference in her voice was more painful than anything I had ever heard. She didn't want me in her life. I wasn't wanted. Her words echoed in my mind for days. How could someone who was supposed to be family treat me like this? I had tried so hard to be a good son, to be respectful, to love her because my dad did. But now, everything felt like a lie. I didn't know who to trust anymore. The person I thought would become my ally, the one who was supposed to care for me, had just rejected me so effortlessly. It wasn't just about the words, it was the coldness, the disdain, the fact that she couldn't even pretend to like me when my dad wasn't around. Her hatred became an invisible wall between us, a constant reminder that I was an outsider in my own family. Every weekend visit felt like a test of endurance, trying to survive another day under her scrutiny. As time went on, Gina's cruelty grew sharper, and I felt more and more like an invisible stranger in my own home. She would say things to me when my father wasn't around, each word more hurtful than the last. Her insults were calculated, designed to make me feel small, insignificant. She would mock my body, my appearance, and the way I carried myself. But she did it with such subtlety that no one could see it except for me. I began to dread weekends at my dad's, praying for any excuse to avoid going. The idea of facing her, of being trapped in that house, was unbearable. I started pretending I was sick, hoping my mom would notice and let me stay home. But my dad would always call, sounding disappointed, his voice filled with concern, and I would reluctantly pack my things. It wasn't just the words anymore. It was the way she looked at me, the sneers, and the cold, cutting glares she sent my way when my dad wasn't paying attention. She would turn her back on me, deliberately ignore me during meals, or force me to sit alone in the corner while they all ate together. The emptiness inside me grew deeper. I was invisible, but not in a peaceful way, in a suffocating, isolating kind of way. I would sit there, my stomach growling with hunger, watching them eat without offering me anything but scraps. It was as if I wasn't even worth the effort of basic human kindness. Every visit felt like a battle for survival, fighting for scraps of attention, fighting to feel like I wasn't just an afterthought in their lives. The night everything fell apart was one I will never forget. I was 21, and after years of painful neglect, I thought I had finally reached a point of numb acceptance. But nothing could have prepared me for what Gina did. It started like any other dinner at my dad's quiet, strained, with me sitting on the outskirts of their world, invisible. But as the evening went on, I could feel the tension building. My dad had called me to let me know he had some important news to share, and although I was curious, a small part of me dreaded the idea of another fake moment of happiness, another one of Gina's manipulations, hidden under a layer of forced smiles. Then, my dad dropped the bombshell. He was updating his will. He had decided to leave his house to Gina, the woman who had tormented me for years. The vintage car I'd shared countless memories with him, he was leaving it to me. My father's words were meant to be kind, but the storm that brewed in Gina's eyes told me everything I needed to know. She hadn't expected it. Her smile faltered, and for a moment, I could see the raw resentment bubbling beneath her forced composure. She exchanged looks with the twins, their faces twisted in silent outrage. Suddenly, the weight of her manipulation hit me harder than I ever imagined. And then, in that moment of calm before the storm, she struck. With tears streaming down her face, she made the most grotesque accusation imaginable. She claimed that I had assaulted her when I was younger. The words hit me like a punch to the gut, and I froze, unable to speak. My world shattered in an instant. She twisted the truth, concocted a lie so vile, and my father, the man I had loved and trusted, looked at me with confusion, doubt in his eyes. He asked if it was true. I couldn't believe this voice, full of disbelief, cut deeper than any wound Gina could have inflicted. I yelled in my defense, but she cried louder, each tear a reminder that I was losing everything. My father, my family, my entire life, all ripped away in that single, heart-wrenching moment. As Gina's words echoed in the room, everything I had built up in my mind, the hope, the trust, the love I had once felt for my dad began to crumble. Her accusation was a poison, seeping into my father's heart, and I watched in agonizing silence as he faltered, torn between his love for his wife and his son. The weight of his doubt crushed me. He asked me, with a mixture of fear and confusion, if it was true. I couldn't even look him in the eyes. I was frozen, my throat closing as I tried to explain that it was all a lie. But she had already won. Her tears, her sobs fake as they were created a spectacle that I couldn't fight against. I felt like a shadow, suffocating in the tension between them. And then came the worst blow of all my father told me to leave. The words felt like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. The betrayal wasn't just in the false accusation. It was in my father's choice to believe her, to turn his back on me without a second thought. I packed my things, my hands shaking, the door closing behind me with the finality of a lost future. I was no longer his son, just an outcast. The pain was unbearable, a wound too deep to heal. Years passed, but the pain of that night never truly left me. I built walls around my heart, locking away the shattered pieces of my relationship with my father. I tried to move on, tried to rebuild my life without them, but the emptiness always lingered. Then, out of nowhere, my father reached out. It had been so long, I thought I would never hear from him again. His voice on the other end of the phone was weak, broken, and aged. It sounded like a man who had been through more than just time. It sounded like a man who had been living with regret. He told me that he needed to talk, that he had something important to share. I felt a flicker of hope, but it quickly turned to bitterness. 7 years. 7 years of silence, of believing Gina's lies, of choosing her over me. Could anything he said now undo that pain? When we spoke, my father revealed the truth about Gina, her lies, her manipulation, and the affair she had been having with his best friend for years. My heart sank as he confessed that he had finally seen through her facade. But the damage was done. The man I once trusted had been completely blinded by her. And now, all he could offer me was an apology, words that felt empty, hollow. I wasn't sure if I should feel anger or pity. He begged for my forgiveness, but I could barely process the fact that after all this time, the truth had come to light. I had already cut him out of my life. His apology came too late. When my father reached out to me, I was filled with a mixture of disbelief and fury. After everything, the years of emotional abandonment, the lies, the false accusations, I didn't know how to react. Part of me wanted to scream at him for abandoning me in the first place. The other part of me wanted to believe him, wanted to imagine that this apology, this late revelation, could heal the years of pain. But I couldn't let myself fall into that trap again. I had rebuilt my life piece by piece without him. My life was finally mine again, and I wasn't going to let him shatter it with his sudden, unearned remorse. I turned to my mother, the one person who had always been by my side, who had never once doubted me. She had seen my suffering, stood by me through the darkest days, and never once questioned my truth. As we sat together, I felt the weight of my past lifting, bit by bit. She hugged me tightly, assuring me that I was right to cut him out of my life. She was proud of me for surviving, for becoming stronger, for not letting the poison of their betrayal define me. But even then, the emotional scars ran deep. My relationships with others, especially women, had been tainted by fear. I constantly feared being accused again, losing everything I had worked so hard to rebuild. The psychological toll was immense. It took months of therapy, countless sleepless nights, and painful self-reflection to even begin to trust again. I realized then that the journey to healing wasn't just about cutting off my father, it was about rediscovering myself, about rebuilding my trust in the world and in the people I loved. And though I couldn't erase the past, I could control my future. The years that followed were a blur of mixed emotions: pain, anger, and, strangely, relief. I had made the decision to cut my father out of my life, but it didn't come without its consequences. The silence between us grew louder, as if every unspoken word amplified the fracture between us. It wasn't just about the betrayal anymore. It was about survival. I focused on rebuilding myself, learning to trust again, and slowly letting go of the anger that had consumed me. But there were nights, dark and quiet, when the memories would creep in those final moments of rejection, the look in my father's eyes as he believed the lies. It took everything in me to push those thoughts away, to remind myself that I was worthy of love, that I wasn't defined by the cruelty of others. Eventually, I met Mara. She came into my life like a beacon of hope, someone who saw me for who I truly was, not the broken, battered son of a man who abandoned me, but a man who had overcome unimaginable pain. She became my rock, and my mom too supported me through this journey of healing. With their love and support, I learned to smile again, to laugh, and to live without fear of being hurt again. But despite the love I now had, a part of me still couldn't fully shake the weight of the past. Every new relationship, every new opportunity came with the shadow of betrayal lingering over me. Yet, as the years passed, I started to understand something important. True healing came from letting go not of the people who had hurt me, but of the pain they caused.